on Sports. My name is Nathan Simmons, and with me as always is Nathan Kwan. We have a lot to discuss this week, and particularly stuff that happened today. But first, I believe Kwan has something to say about his Houston Astros.
Here comes the collapse that Houston sports fans have come to know over my lifetime. Every time you think a team is a legitimate championship contender, they end up falling apart down the stretch. And this is what's happening to the Houston Astros right now. They just came off a series where they got swept by the worst team in the American League, in the Chicago White Sox, a team that sold off basically every piece of Major League talent that they had at the trade deadline, a team that had lost 19 of their past 22 going into the series, and they slapped around the Astros like they were a minor league team. Let's start to talk about the pitching. It's a mess. And Dallas Keuchel was roughed up Tuesday night, gave up 8 earned runs, one of the worst starts of his career. Colin McHugh regressed and had a horrible start. Last night, you got a good start from Brad Peacock, but then, of course, Ken Giles in the bullpen blows it. So it's just up and down. The rotation, you can't depend on it. The bullpen is an absolute mess. The Astros have the worst ERA in baseball since the All-Star break. And I think everybody knows at this point that a trade should have been done. And there's comments right after the deadline from Dallas Keuchel that he said disappointment is an understatement. And then yesterday, Josh Reddick on Major League Baseball radio said the team was down in the dumps after the trade deadline. The disconnect between the players and the management is just completely mismanaged this whole season. And the Astros are still in a solid position. I will say that. They still have a 13-game lead in the American League West. That's not going to be in doubt, barring a historic collapse. But home field in the American League is very much in doubt. Boston Red Sox are absolutely on fire, and the lead is down to, I believe, 6 games for that home field. And given the Astros play against some of the other American League contenders this year, and the Red Sox and the Indians, and you look at the Yankees, all those 3 teams have better pitching than the Astros. It's looking more and more like this team is a first-round exit. So what are your thoughts, Nathan?
I don't want to say I wouldn't go that far, because I definitely think it's time to at least start sort of panicking, especially considering that, again, you have 2 players coming out of their way to basically say that we feel hosed by management, and that's not a good sign. Because if you don't feel like the GM is on your side and is trying to do everything in his power to make sure that this team can win, that is a huge gut punch to team morale. And the fact that they're becoming more and more vocal about it. Before, it was just sort of one comment by Dallas Keuchel, which was pretty honest in all fairness, and was much more honest than you would expect. But you could probably say it's understandable for him to be frustrated. But we're already a couple weeks outside of the trade deadline, and Josh Reddick is now saying even more about how this team has kind of basically slipped into the slump because of how little was done at the trade deadline. And look, they still have a chance to at least try to make a trade at the waiver deadline. It's just it's so much harder to go do that. But I remember back in 2013 when the Rangers were able to swing some sort of deal for Alex Rios to replace Nelson Cruz. But that's the type of player you're going to probably be expecting here. Now granted, because relief pitchers are still somewhat undervalued, you could probably still swing a deal at the waiver deadline in order to get a decent one that can come in. It's just that right now, it's such a mess, and I don't know who you can really trust to even be your closer. Yes, your closer doesn't have to be your best pitcher, but as a Rangers fan, and I know this all too well, if your closer can't end a game with 1 pitch away, with 1 strike away, then you're kind of screwed. But that also being said, I feel the rotation can at least be helped from within in terms of just Dallas Keuchel. I feel yeah, he had a huge misstep in his last outing, but I feel he can turn things around. I think McHugh, he's definitely shown some potential, I believe, last year, but I think it's maybe just taking him a bit of an adjustment to come back off the DL. Maybe that might be it, and he's just struggling a bit with his fatigue and a bit with also just trying to get back into the swing of things. Colors, I know he's on the DL right now, but he should still be available once it comes down the stretch. And look, you still only have a 6-game lead on Boston for the first overall, and I forget how much of a lead you guys have in the AL West. So at the end of the day, so long as you're playing decent baseball towards the end of the regular season, and you at least are in the playoffs, you have a shot. And this Houston Astro team does technically have the pieces right now. This is one of the best lineups in all of baseball. So you shouldn't be worried about that. I mean, the starting rotation has potential. You have obviously a number one in Dallas Keuchel. I mean, a former AL Cy Young winner. I mean, like, you can't get any better than that, really. And then you have kind of someone that can fill in McCullers. I mean, assuming he can come back and be about as effective as he was prior. With McHugh, you just sort of wait and hope, and that right there is your rotation for the first three. It's just really that bullpen really needs to be fixed. I know you said that they have one of the top prospect systems in all of Major League, but like, if they can't find anyone on that farm system to at least like plug in and be a decent bullpen option, then like I mean, like, do you guys have any sort of options on the farm right now, or no?
No, and we've seen guys come up and down. Jordan Jankowski, Raymond Gouduan, Francis Martez is, of course, with the Major League team now. So there's just not a lot of Major League ready pitching. A lot of their top prospects are down in high A and low A, so they're still years away from the majors. But I mean, I'm going to play both sides here. I understand Jeff Luhnow's thinking at the trade deadline, and that this team is really young and it's got years of contention, and you don't want to go for broke and mortgage the future for one title. Because fundamentally, even if they had gotten a starting pitcher and a reliever at the trade deadline, if Dallas Keuchel pitches like this, if Lance McCullers pitches like he did the past 5 starts before he went back on the disabled list, if Colin McHugh isn't giving you quality starts, if Ken Giles isn't closing games, then even if you did make those trades, you're not going to win the World Series with just one good starting pitcher and one good reliever. There's still a lot of problems there. But with that being said, you have veterans on the team in Carlos Beltran. He's 40. He's not going to get any more opportunities to win that World Series. Josh Reddick is up there in age. Brian McCain is up there in age. For the veterans, management needs to show them that they value their contribution to the team and they want to win now, because in a couple of years, Beltran's going to be gone. McCann's probably going to be gone. And it's tough for you to take that as a player and that your management is not going for broke, because I know for sure if Daryl Morey was running this team, multiple trades would have happened. Daryl Morey is a guy that he doesn't care what anybody thinks. He goes for broke. He rolls the dice and he gets the superstars in here and he tries to make it work. And if you're a good organization and you're good at drafting, you can always replenish those draft picks. You don't need to hold on to them and hope for the future that you're not going to be able to get any more, because if you trust your drafting every year, you're going to have a crop of maybe 4 to 5 guys that you can plug into your system and replenish that. But I mean, in the end, like, what's done is done. The players can't use what was done at the trade deadline and continue to let that affect their play on the field, because it's starting to snowball. And if they don't snap out of it soon, it's going to end really early in October. Talking about good news, I guess, this week is at least Alex Bregman continues his hot streak. Coming in tonight, he had 11 straight games of an extra base hit, which was really impressive. It's the longest streak in the majors this year, and I think the longest for the team since 2000. And they also got a thrilling win on Sunday with Juan Centeno, who's a catcher that has come up a couple times this year. He had a walk-off hit, and he's had good contribution for the team this year. Right now, they're actually playing the Texas Rangers in Arlington as we record this on Friday night, and they're losing 6-2. So it looks like their 4th straight loss tonight, unless the Rangers bullpen can do what the Rangers bullpen has been doing, which I would appreciate very much. But after tonight, they finish up the series against the Rangers in Arlington, and then they play a home-and-home with the Arizona Diamondbacks. But let's talk about the aforementioned Texas Rangers.
So the Texas Rangers bullpen's actually not as bad as the Houston Astros bullpen right now, I would
Okay,
say.
that's low blow.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just stating a fact here. But yeah, no, I mean, the Rangers have been playing .500 baseball since the deadline, really. They took 2 out of 4 in Minnesota and then came home and split the series, a 2-game series against the New York Mets. And I mean, again, it's just the big news coming from this past week right now is just Joey Gallo has just been like knocking the cover off the ball. I mean, unfortunately, tonight it looks like this is going to be the end of his hitting streak, but he actually had an 8-game hitting streak, which, I mean, considering that he was someone like at the beginning of the streak that was still below the Mendoza line, which is below .200 batting average, like the fact that he's able to string this together, I mean, just sort of shows how tantalizing a a hitter he could possibly be in the future. If he could ever like just at least like raise his batting average to something like respectable, like 250, like this is someone that we can be talking about as like not only your leader in OPS in all of the league, but like someone that can really contend for AL MVP. Going beyond that too, I mean, you have Elvis Andrus has been, while he wasn't exactly great throughout the week, he, at least today, he's got 3 hits, 2 of them doubles. Adrian Beltre has been playing decently well. He's been hitting pretty decently well. Mazzara, I mean, Mazzara is Mazzara at this point. I mean, he got 2 RBI tonight, I believe. But outside of that, I mean, he's just sort of, he is what he is. I mean, you'd like to see him try to get more consistency, and he's kind of finding it, but I just feel like at this point, he's kind of like really a streaky hitter. Odor got benched, and it was very much needed at this point. Like, he's just someone that really needs to work on his approach at the plate. I mean, he's someone that's even more like Jekyll and Hyde than like Mazzara when it comes to streakiness when hitting. But yeah, I would say at this point, and to at least like give some credit to the rotation, Perez had an absolute gem against the New York Mets. He went 8 innings pitched, a complete game with 5 strikeouts and only gave up 1 earned run. And then you have Cashner and Hamels have been okay, but not like have been great actually. Honestly, AJ Griffin has been on and off, and then the spot starters and Austin Biebens, Dirks, and Nick Martinez have not been good, but that at this point is to be expected. This team just really doesn't seem all that committed to tanking. I mean, yeah, they did trade away one of their best players in Yu Darvish. Still breaks my heart, but you know, I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of that was just to help like replenish the system at least somewhat. And like Willie Calhoun's actually been doing pretty decently as well. He, I believe, has 6 home runs since he got traded to the Rangers and has been hitting pretty well at Round Rock. He's someone that might get a September call up. What you have to keep your eye on is just Gallo and just see if he can at least continue his torrid pace after this game. About some injuries, Cashner has a stiff neck in his day-to-day. Keona Kella is going to the 10-day DL again. Ross might be back soon, but I mean, at this point, it might be a bit of a lost cause for him outside of just like maybe trying to recuperate some value and show that he can still be a starting pitcher in this league so that he can at least get another contract next year. But next week they finish up the series with Houston. Then they have another home series against Detroit. And then following that, they have another home series against Chicago White Sox.
So let's move on to the biggest story of the day in the NFL. And the Dallas Cowboys star running back Ezekiel Elliott was suspended for 6 games by the league for violating its conduct policies. Nathan Simmons, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, as the Dallas fan here, when the news first broke that was going to be a 6-game suspension, everyone was very much going on the whole like anti-NFL train, anti-Goodell train. And like, I'm still very much like anti-Goodell, anti-NFL. And like, make no mistake, this is still very much a carryover of how the NFL has been so horrendous in punishing players that have done domestic violence. You still have, for example, Josh Brown, who was the kicker for the New York Giants. He only got 1 game. Now, that being said, he wasn't hired by any other team. But if you're going to do that, then you could have at least said like a full game suspension. And this is someone that like admitted to doing it multiple times, and admitted to doing it on company time, technically. Because I remember he apparently there was an incident during Pro Bowl week in which he did domestic violence against his wife. Now, with Ezekiel Elliott, so this is a very touchy subject, mostly a lot to do with the actual legal situation that he was in, because prior to this, the case had been dismissed. But from what I remember reading the first time that I read about that, so this was like a year ago, they didn't dismiss it because that this was someone fibbing up stories or something like that, or that there was just no evidence, but it was just basically the witness was too inconsistent, and that it was just not enough clarity and not enough hard evidence to really bring this to trial. But that just because that's the case, that does not mean that there might have been an incident. Like, what you have to remember too is that the justice system in and of itself, as constructed, is still very much broke when it comes to women trying to bring their case against their attacker. A perfect example is Brock Turner, who straight up sexually assaulted someone and only got 3 months in jail. And the thing about it is that when you see those odds and when you see the way people get treated when they bring an accusation, even if it is true, they get told that they're a liar. They get told that they're trying to bring themselves down. They get told that they're trying to ruin someone's career or they're trying to get money. And oftentimes the emotional abuse from it is not worth trying to get someone only like 3 months or 6 months in prison. And you look at the pictures recently just released 3 hours ago by TMZ. And that's what's most messed up about the situation too, is that TMZ of all people is essentially been sort of guiding what the NFL should be doing in terms of how to act morally. If the NFL can't have a higher moral standard than TMZ, something's really wrong with the NFL. That's what I'm going to say. And that this is part of why I'm still very much anti-NFL. I mean, the part of it that makes me just sort of like very hesitant to say, or not even hesitant, but just like very, very much like just I don't want to like say that this is just like the NFL trying to like bring down their boot on and make an example out of Ezekiel. I mean, like I'm sure that's might be part of the reason why that they handed down a very harsh sentence. But I mean, you look at those pictures, and if those are the pictures from the victim from that time, if those were taken right at that same time, right from that person, I mean, you look at it and it's like bruises, very consistent from like other times that I've seen pictures of domestic abuse, like you saw bruises sort of kind of going out a slant on someone's arm. And like it's very consistent with someone like being grabbed. And then you saw also bruises around her neck. I mean, you look at it and it's just like, well, how did those bruises get there then if it wasn't from Ezekiel? I mean, at the end of the day too, I mean, I have no sympathy for Jerry. When I think about it too, it's just like, because Jerry brought in someone that was known for domestic violence with Greg Hardy specifically. And then now he's going to say like, oh, well, this might be too far. Like, no, to some extent, you kind of brought that on yourself. But I mean, in all fairness too, like, if you guys want to be consistent with prosecuting domestic violence, you're going to have to make sure that the evidence lines up. And that being said, as much as I hate the NFL and as much as I hate Goodell, this might be the right step in the right direction. If the evidence that TMZ, and again, that's something that just like really annoys me, just TMZ, come on, that TMZ was able to show that they procured and that they produced. If those are 100% what was from the Vic, what was shown, to some extent, like the NFL has to really start holding people to a higher standard when it comes to domestic violence. And this sort of just ties back to just like how prior to this, they set up a terrible precedent in which people that commit domestic violence didn't receive any punishment before, barely any punishment before. And now you have to start catching up, and you now have to start really starting to punish people. And, you know, at the end of the day too, like I can't sit here and be like Roger Goodell or the NFL, like that they actually care about women. They don't. Because I mean, like these are the same people that were terrible at punishing people for domestic violence prior to this. It's just that now that they've been caught red-handed and have actually been criticized for it, now they're like trying to save PR by doing this. To some extent, that's what's happening. But at the end of the day too, if Ezekiel actually did this, I can't defend him. It's indefensible what he did, honestly. It's absolutely indefensible.
Okay, here's a Houston Texans fan and just general NFL fan perspective. So I'm going to probably follow along with what your train of thought. So my first thing I still do not understand is why the NFL does anything with investigate. Like I was reading the details of how many lawyers they went through and how many investigators. And I'm just thinking to myself, why is a sports league involved with that? Why is Roger Goodell, why is he the judge, the jury, and the prosecutor? And then when they talk about these suspensions and they talk about the appeal process, how does that make any sense? So I decide how much discipline you get. You whine to me, and now I'm going to reconsider. I do not understand the whole process of what the NFL does and why they're even involved with all this. Why is this just not left to authorities to deal with? However, this is the agreement that they had in place, right? The NFL can hold players to a higher standard because they agreed to it in their collective bargaining agreement. The Players Association agreed that the commissioner has these powers that he can deal out justice however he feels should be dealt out, which leads to the inconsistencies. As you said, Josh Brown, 1 game suspension. He admitted to hitting his wife, 1 game. Ray Rice prosecuted for hitting, and he got 2 games. And then you have Tom Brady deflating footballs, allegedly, 4 games. And Ezekiel Elliott not prosecuted, not charged with any crime, but because there's allegations and the NFL did its own private investigation, 6 games. Inconsistent across the board. I do agree with you, domestic violence. Ray Rice 2 games was a joke. Josh Brown 1 game was a joke. So this is a step in the right direction. If the evidence, as you mentioned, the pictures, that's a step in the right direction. I agree with that. And also Jerry Jones, like, I do not understand this human being. The owners, Jerry Jones is an owner. He's a very influential owner. They agreed to this process. They allowed the commissioner to work for them. They agreed to their commissioner to uphold the standards of the NFL, because when the NFL makes money, they make money, and they're in it to make money. If you agree to it, you can't have it, oh, when things don't go my way, oh, how dare you? But then when things do go your way, oh, yes, I'm for justice. Yes, I care about making sure that the morals of the league are upheld. You can't have it both ways, dude.
I 100% agree. I mean, it's something we both kind of alluded to, but I mean, like, they only act morally when it's financially prudent. And even then, like, for example, I mean, like, you have Randy Gregory, who has never committed a violent crime, but he's looking at basically missing 2 seasons because he smoked pot, which is legal in 3 states, I think, at this point, right? And it's just like, what exactly do you view as moral? And why is being caught with pot in your system 3 times as still way worse than someone that committed domestic violence? Like, that to me doesn't make any sense. And at the end of the day, like, the reason it doesn't is because they only act moral when it's financially convenient. And that's what's so messed up about this situation. Like, it shouldn't take the possibility of you losing millions for you to, like, at least institute protocols for concussions. It shouldn't take you the idea that, like, women might stop buying your product for you to start actually handing down punishment for domestic violence. It shouldn't take you that long to go do that. And yet it did. It did, because you only care about the bottom line. That is what is so messed up about the situation.
Yeah, and I agree. And I know there's Cowboy fans that are upset about this, but I mean, if we're going to look at solutions going forward to all this, if it was up to me, Roger Goodell cannot be the person making these decisions. If you want to say that you care about the player conduct, whatever that means, because the domestic violence was a big part of this, but also you could loop in the fight at the club he had earlier this month, or the speeding, or the lifting up the girl's shirt at the St. Patrick's Day parade. It could be a number of different things, but it either needs to be defined, this is what you do equals this number of games, or it needs to be handled by somebody else who's not affiliated with the NFL. Because it's absurd to me that the NFL does its own investigations outside of the law and outside the police. I mean, these alleged incidents happened over a year ago, and it took a lot of time for the details to come out. But I don't understand this whole process of how they discipline players. Like, in the end, I don't have a problem, especially if he did the crime. Like, he deserves everything he got with the suspension, but I just don't agree with the whole process of how the NFL deals with all these situations.
Agreed. Absolutely. 100%. Like, there needs either get transparency or make sure that this goes through more channels than just Roger Goodell. Because, I mean, we already see like what Roger Goodell's like beliefs are, and it's just like, you know, like, he, again, like we said, like, he's only going to do it if it keeps people off his back. I mean, going back to like how like Cowboys fans are like, you know, getting upset about this. Like, I mean, like, I get it, because it's easy to buy into the narrative that like, oh, they're only doing this because it's the Cowboys and they want to make an example, and the Giants owner is in charge of the discipline committee or something like that. I mean, it's easy to sort of fall into that pattern, but you got to like remove the emotion from it, because I understand like you're emotionally invested in this team, but like just wait for more of the evidence to come out. Okay. Or just wait for that.
Yeah,
I mean, don't rush to that conclusion.
He made those decisions to put himself in those situations, whether or not how much of that evidence is being true or not being true. He controls himself. He controls his actions and what he does. That's your agreement as a player in the NFL, that you agree, if you join the league, that the league can hold your conduct up to its standards. And if you hurt the name of the league, the league's going to come down on you, because in the end, the NFL is all about protecting the shield.
It's all a business, and businesses are allowed to a higher standard. I mean, that's something you got to realize. And it's unfortunately pervasive within the justice system. That's not the only thing that happened in the NFL today, surprisingly. Big trade went down, 3-team trade involving the Rams, the Eagles, and the Bills. So Sammy Watkins, a former top 5 overall pick, I think 2015 wide receiver, has a lot of potential, but had a real down year last year. He's now a Los Angeles Ram. And in return, basically, the Eagles got involved and they ended up getting cornerback Darby to basically have a veteran presence in the secondary, since right now they're only relying on 2 people that they picked in the second and third round this past draft. And then what the Bills get is they get Jordan Matthews, who was the number 1 receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles. They also get another cornerback that is, his name is escaping me, but they also get the Los Angeles Rams 2nd round pick in next year's draft, I believe. And then they get a 3rd round pick from the Eagles.
This is the Buffalo Bills basically tanking, right? I mean, they traded their top wide receiver and their top cornerback, and they're basically saying 2017, we don't care about that. We're going to look ahead to 2018, which is
sort
stunning.
of, yeah. I mean, I would have said that had they not ended up also getting Jordan Matthews in this trade. I mean, Jordan Matthews is going to be a free agent after this year, and he's still a very good wide receiver. I mean, I don't think he has the potential that Sammy Watkins. He's technically a fantasy 1-2 receiver. He's on that cusp right there. He's on that cusp. He's not.
He burned me a couple of years ago when I picked him in the middle rounds, and he was terrible.
I don't hold it against him. He was a decent wide receiver. I did not lose that fantasy league because of Jordan Matthews. I lost it because of a lot of different things. But Jordan Matthews, I'd say, is technically a decent number 1 option. The thing about the Bills is that they have they're technically 3 wide receivers deep. I don't remember the other 2 wide receivers. I mean, if you look at what the Eagles had, they just had a hole to burn when it came to wide receivers that they had, because they had already Alshon Jeffries and Torrey Smith, and then those 2, and then you have Nelson Aguilar is going to be your 3rd option. And I mean, he really struggled last year to catch anything, but he should be fine as your 3rd option behind 2 veteran QBs, especially when you're trying to help Carson Wentz. This trade should technically help Jared Goff quite a bit, because prior to that, the Los Angeles Rams had no wide receiving options of any real decent quality. I mean, they gave all that money to Tavon Austin, and he has not been helpful at all. But that being said, giving up a 2nd round pick for someone that struggled last year seems to be a bit much, especially when you consider how many picks the Rams have already traded for a team that's still very much in the cellar. It's a little bit questionable, but I mean, at the end of the day, if Sammy Watkins can turn it around under Jared Goff, I mean, I don't know what the cap situation is for them, especially since yeah, they signed Tavon Austin to all that money, but I assume that they could probably fit him in. But you have all that, and then you have Todd Gurley, who, I mean, yeah, he struggled a bit last year, but he was still productive. I mean, honestly, they're trying to remove as many excuses for Jared Goff as they can, and honestly, the more they can help Jared Goff ease into the NFL, the better, and this should help. And I really do like it for the Buffalo Bills. I mean, you do say that, and yeah, going back to that is that they got a great futures package. I mean, the only person I feel real bad for in Buffalo is that Tyrod Taylor once again sort of gets screwed over. I mean, he's not really a franchise quarterback, but I mean, he's a decent quarterback. I mean, if you put him on a team with a strong defense, which I mean, they have the ability to, but I mean, at the same time, it's kind of hard to say. He has a chance, and he was working with Sammy Watkins in the offseason, and now that all that work's gone out the window with 30 days left until the opening game. At this point too, I mean, I just don't see the Buffalo Bills beating the Pats. And honestly, Miami Dolphins, they made it to the playoffs last year. It's going to be interesting to see if they can repeat this year. But so let's move on to the Houston Texans, who had their first preseason games this week. And Deshaun Watson, I've heard some good things about this guy. Well, what about you?
Yeah, I'll get to Watson in a bit, but just some first thoughts on the game itself. Quarterback battle is very interesting, but in the end, it won't matter if the offensive line plays like that. Absolutely terrible. The first 2 series, completely blown apart. This is just more leverage for Dwayne Brown, I guess. They were a terrible offensive line with Dwayne Brown last year. They're an absolutely joke offensive line without Dwayne Brown. they gave Tom Savage absolutely no time those first 2 series, and he just basically was out there to get killed. Running back battle for the backup job, Lamar Miller's a starter, but Deontay Foreman and Alfred Blue, that's going to be a pretty good battle. Alfred Blue's had the job the last couple of years, and the Texans drafting Deontay Foreman in the 3rd round. He had 76 yards on 9 carries, had a hurdle over a defender. So I think Foreman might end up winning that backup job, and then Alfred Blue will be the number 3 running back. But let's talk about the quarterbacks. Tom Savage, first 2 series are terrible. Not really his fault with the offensive line play, but the 3rd series, he led the team to a touchdown drive. He finished 9 of 11 for 69 yards and had a quarterback rating of 93. So he did what he was asked to do. He led the team to a touchdown drive. Ultimately, the playbook was very simplified for him. He made a lot of easy throws. So I would say Tom Savage didn't really do anything that would hurt his continual number 1 spot on the depth chart, which, again, Bill O'Brien has said Tom Savage is a starter for now. DeAndre Hopkins has said Tom Savage is his guy. But then Deshaun Watson came in the 2nd and 3rd quarters, and he had a pretty good debut, I'd say. 15 of 25, 179, had a touchdown scramble, was sacked 3 times, quarterback rating of 82. But, I mean, just watching him on the field, immediately I could tell the poise. And in just the first couple plays, the pocket kind of broke down. He just kind of slid out to his right, kept his eyes down the field, didn't panic, delivered a good ball, and the receiver just stepped out of bounds. But the talent level is there. He missed a couple of wide open throws, but that's just going to come with getting on the same page with his receivers. And there's a lot of 2nd team and 3rd team guys he was throwing to that probably won't make the team. But what Texans fans wanted to see from him was a guy with good poise, good accuracy, can use his legs. And if he can pick up the playbook, I could easily see him be in a regular season game for the team by, let's say, like week 8 or something. If not, he winning the job outright out of camp. But I mean, I think it's a good situation for both of them. I think Watson's going to push Savage to be better. And I think he's earned his shot to be the starter at this point. If Watson's talent and his ability to pick up the NFL playbook and read NFL defenses, if that gives the Texans a better shot to win at this point, and you're not scared that he's going to get killed by that terrible offensive line, then I say go for it with that. Other notes was cornerback Robert Nelson, who was actually really good as a rookie last year. He got burned a couple times. So cornerback's going to be another one of my big keys this preseason to see if they can replace AJ Boye, who they lost to the Jaguars. And then finally, the penalties. They had 12 penalties, and they were middle of the pack in the league last year. And they're going to have to clean that up because I don't think they're a talented enough team, especially on the offensive side of the ball, to continually shoot themselves in the foot every other play.
Yeah, agreed. It's funny that you bring up poise being sort of the thing that stands out with Deshaun Watson, because that's what stood out to me when I first watched Dak Prescott going against the Los Angeles Rams in his first preseason game. I mean, I knew it was also against backups, but granted, obviously something that's a huge difference between the two in terms of situation that you already pointed out is the offensive line. But I definitely came away impressed by Deshaun Watson. I mean, I know I talked before about how he has maybe a problem with the interceptions, but I mean, it sounded like he was able to do a decent job, choosing where to pass it, good decision making. And so I think he's got a good shot of really sort of winning the job right out of camp, honestly. No offense to Tom Savage. I think Tom Savage did a decent job towards the end. Another person to point out, definitely Deontay Foreman. Absolutely love that hurdle. And again, as I think I might have stated before, I mean, I'm still kind of shocked that he fell to the 3rd round. I mean, I knew he was probably going to be a 2nd round pick, maybe a little bit later. But I mean, if it wasn't for some of the injury concerns as well as the high usage that he had under Charlie Strong, he's someone that could have very easily gone in the 1st. I mean, at least to me, and he's someone that also has a good shot of winning at least the backup running back job right out of camp.
You have any other Cowboys notes?
No, Tyron Crawford's hurt. It's not great, but it's not bad. But I know Sean Lee is struggling with his health. So that's not good to see. I mean, outside of that, I mean, it's a good thing that we have Alfred Morris and Darren McFadden back. So, I mean, it's not as great a tandem technically in terms of on-field production as Ezekiel Elliott was, but you can at least be in a good position.
All right, let's move on to shoutouts.
Yeah, shoutouts. Okay.
So first, let's talk about MLS. Houston Dynamo got a 0-0 draw at RSL. Last week, they're still second in the West, but the fans are really criticizing head coach Wilmer Cabrera, and the lineups he's put out this year for some of the road games have been really strange. I know there's been a lot of their guys out during Gold Cup, especially Ramel Kyoto and Albert Feliz and Akubo Torres, of course. But the lineup he puts out for some of these games is they're parking the bus and going for the draw right at the start, which I know there's a balance between a head coach of trying to get the younger players more experience and also trying to get results. But I mean, ultimately, if there's players that are healthy and are better, you need to play them. And I don't understand sometimes his thinking in going into these matches. There's a huge match tomorrow night against San Jose. The Western Conference is really stacked up. There are 4 teams that are tied at 34 points. FC Dallas is one of them, and Dynamo are one of them. And there's only 5 points between first and the last playoff spot in the West. So it's going to be a lot of figuring out in the final 2 months of the season to see which teams get into the playoffs and what position they get. The Dynamo also signed a Swiss international center back in Philippe Senderos, 32-year-old, played for Switzerland in the last 3 World Cups. Kind of an interesting signing. Their center back play has been okay this year, better than the years past, but they sign an old guy to kind of bolster the depth of the old guys they already have, which is interesting. But we'll see how much he plays right away or down the stretch. They're still looking to get Tomas Martinez, their DP, fit and ready to play, and we need him in the midfield. FC Dallas, meanwhile, they got ripped apart last week in Philadelphia, 3-1.
They're kind of a mess right now. I mean, I know a lot of people have criticized like Kellen Acosta since for some of his play during the Gold Cup, but I mean it wasn't really that deserved. But then you look at it, and he was like on the bench against Vancouver last game. I think we're still waiting to hear about like possible transfers to Europe. But I mean, if there isn't any news about him transferring to any European team, like you kind of start to wonder if people are beginning to second guess him as a top line middle field caliber person. But that being said, I mean, they just have to get back on track. I mean, it's not as bad a slide as the Houston Astros are doing technically, I guess. But I mean, like they kind of have to get it back together, especially as the Sounders seem to be just going off with the 1-2 punch of Dempsey and Morris. But we'll see.
Okay, so also shout out to Vince Wilfork. He retired this past week. He sent out a message saying, "No more cleats, I'm moving on to smoked meats." I think he's been on smoked meats for a while, given his size, but
he's one of the best defensive players of the past 10 years. So,
oh yeah, and he signed with the New England Patriots, but his contribution to the Texans the last 2 years he was okay in that defensive line. I think he showed his age, but mentoring some of the younger players on the team, especially like Jadeveon Clowney, and then even JJ Watt to some extent. I think he was brought in here to bring that leadership, and I think he did do just that.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah. Also, I guess Texas basketball is recruiting so well again. They got 2 top 100 recruits in Brock Cunningham and Gerald Liddell, 2 forwards. It's going to be real interesting. I mean, NCAA football recruiting, usually people flip all the time. Like basketball, even though it's this early, once they commit, they're usually there for the long term, assuming everything stays sort of constant. Shaka Smart, I mean, he's a top-notch recruiter. I mean, it's just whether or not he can really put the team together. I mean, he's got another talented squad this year. We'll see. Also, but the Browns actually released a hype video.
Yes, so shout out to the Cleveland Browns. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it. It's a hype video for Brock Osweiler. There's this crazy rock music in the background. And it's basically him throwing check downs during their scrimmages and practices. They do slow motion on his overhand throwing motion. It's really hilarious. And then, of course, he comes out in the first preseason game for the Browns and stinks it up. And you listen to his post-game press conference, and it's the same excuses he gave the whole season for the Texans. So,
Yeah,
Shout out to the
I thought that
Browns.
was a joke. I honestly thought that was a joke. Like, I mean, like, I remember seeing a headline where the Browns released an unhyped video for Brock Osweiler to help temper expectations for fans, but I didn't realize it was based on reality. Okay, yeah, go Browns. Anyway, that being said, though, Deshaun Kaiser actually, from what I heard, did decently well in his first game. So they probably should have wrong quarterback to hype. Anyway, also I guess shout out to James Harden for a cover of NBA Live 18. Fortunately for basketball players and for him, there's no Madden curse or anything. But in all fairness, there has been sort of a consistency where whoever gets on to the cover the next season, they leave their team. So who knows?
Well, I think for NBA Live, they just need to get a game out because they haven't gotten a game out in years. They keep canceling the game. So we'll see if it actually comes out.
Yeah.
Briefly, we're recording this on Friday night. So PGA Championship update.
Oh, yeah.
So news this week that they are going to move it to May in 2019 from the end of the year. I think it's smart. They don't want to compete with the NFL for ratings. And then also, if you have it in May, you can host it in some of the southern states like Texas, for example, that you wouldn't be able to in August because it's too hot. But in terms of the leaderboard, Kevin Kisner, 8 under, tied with Hideki Matsuyama. Kisner is a guy who has never even finished in the top 10 of any major, so this would be a huge win for him breaking through. Hideki Matsuyama, on the other hand, has gotten close several times. He got closest this past year at the U.S. Open, where he tied for second. Other contenders, Jason Day is 2 back. Louis Oosthuizen, who's won a couple, is 3 back. Ricky Fowler is at -3. He's 5 back. Brooks Koepka, who won the U.S. Open, he's 7 back at 1 under. And our boy Jordan Spieth is
+3.
Yes, he's.
Yeah.
Did he make the cut?
I think
he made the cut. Yeah.
He barely made the cut. I mean,
can't win them all.
Can't win them all. He's young. He's already won one major this year at least, so that's good. This is the one major he has yet to win. So he's got plenty of time, hopefully, to keep going at it. Yeah, that's golf for you, though.
Okay, so I want you guys to visit our website, twoNatesOnSports.com. Also like us on Facebook at twoNatesOnSports. We would really like to up our like count this week. It's been kind of stale the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Also subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music, where you'll get a notification as soon as we release our new episodes. You can also send us any comments and suggestions to our inbox at twoNatesOnSports@gmail.com. Nathan, I will talk to you next week.
Talk to you then, man.